life is about failing. If you haven't realized yet, then it's time to start realizing that right now. Because if we always try to succeed
Mm,
continuously, we're going to set ourselves down for failure.
yeah.
But we have accept the concept about, okay, I'm just going to experiment with it, see where this goes. And then if you succeed with it, it's cool. And if you didn't,
Yeah.
you learned something and you can try it the other way around. And I went through my whole life just being too hard on myself
Mhm.
in a way where I wanted to be the best at the things that I did. I want to learn the fastest. I want to do whatever. And I realized that that's not really what life is about. For me,
Yeah.
life is about learning new things and having fun. And then
Yeah.
if I'm good at it, I want to share that experience with others. That's
So,
my life.
hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of 401 Access Denied. I'm your host, Joseph Carson. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited about today's episode. This guy I've been kind of watching and learning from for many years, and it's so awesome to have him on the show today. So, welcome, STÖK. It's awesome. So amazing to meet you, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow, thanks. That was a good introduction, though. You've been learning from me for years. Like
Absolutely.
that. Thank you. Hi, my name is Fredrik Alexandersson, but most people know me by my hacker handle STÖK. And I'm a hacker creative. I've been working in the IT industry for the last 25 years. I got way too much time invested in troubleshooting and securing Active Directory. And I started to move into the offensive realm on a professional level back in 2014 and been heavily invested into the bug bounty space and that community. So yeah, fun times.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things is that, how did you get into it? What was the transition? What were you doing before? Kind of what was kind of your dedication focus? And then kind of how did you transition more into kind of bug bounties and into the offensive side of things? What was that
Sure.
transition like?
Absolutely. I mean, I started like most geeks do, getting
Mm,
into interested into computers and dabbling and poking at stuff and whatever, and that turned into a profession.
mm,
And I think I started this industry in the 19 mid
mm,
1990s, early 1990s, and started, you know, at a company where I was building computers. Like
mhm,
back in the days, there was all these Asus motherboards and AMD processors and
mm,
everything, and you were building computers, installing Windows on them and whatever, and that kind of led me down the whole
mm,
path of being like a troubleshooter, solving things for
yeah,
people, because I realized I had a knack for that, learning things
mhm,
extremely fast, and then we're able to troubleshoot shit. And eventually, when you're in the situation where you're at that stage, you get
mm,
curious, more curious.
yeah,
Like, okay, then NT4 came out, like, and then suddenly it were Windows at Work groups and all these other
mhm,
things started happening, and I started getting interested into the enterprise kind of game, and been using Windows ever since. And
mhm,
being the call guy, I've
mm,
been working as a consultant most of my life,
mhm,
and at the stage I was the guy you would call when you need to troubleshoot something. You
yeah,
need to figure something out. Like systems down, nothing's working. It's like DNS again, and you go there and you eventually solve it, right? And you will also the one that would be the advisor when new things are being
mhm,
added to project and such. So, and I realized I was so good at identifying things that were broken or misconfigurations that
mhm,
eventually that turned into my offensive side, because I
mhm,
knew where sysadmins cheated. I know where consultants were lax about things, and that made it easier for me to help organizations securing them.
mhm,
And somewhere around, I was at DEF CON in 2017,
mhm,
and that's when bounties came on my radar. Like these
yeah,
cool event by a company called HackerOne, where a bunch of hackers and my friends were sitting there and hacking these companies. And I'm like, wow, can you do that? And like, yeah, we get mad paid too. So
mhm,
we're having a good time. I social engineer myself into the bar, and because I was interested in getting free drinks. I wasn't there for hacking. I wanted to take photos and have a good
mhm,
time and hang out with my friends. But it was really interesting. I'm like, wow, I want to do that. Time went by, and in 2018, I decided to start and dabble with it, and I really never left. It's a great hobby.
It is, and that's always a challenge. Is that when it comes, because I'm the same, very similar background, and it, I struggle a difference between doing work and my hobby, and and it's great. Actually, it's really great when your hobby becomes your work, and that's what you get paid to do, because it allows you kind of to really enjoy every day and the activities you do, and you continue learning. There's always things, of course. There's a portion of your job that becomes that you have to do the administrative side of things. That's always there, but when the majority of it is having fun, it really makes a big difference in your life. And I think one of the things that when you mentioned around 2017, when you talk about bug bounties starting then, because I remember even before then, it was all about vulnerability disclosures. Because we had a session a long time ago, one of our early episodes with CJ and Katie, and we talked about vulnerability disclosures. And this is what I really enjoyed was the difference between when bug bounties started to come much more, and organizations started providing a legal means of getting paid to actually find vulnerabilities and disclose them accordingly, versus vulnerability disclosures, which meant that you find them beforehand. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between some of those, and what types of kind of bug bounties do organizations kind of offer versus the more vulnerability disclosure path?
First off, I'm not an expert in this field. I'm a user of the systems, so and the opinions that I have reflect my own and none else, right? And
Sure.
I just say that there's different ways of doing this, and if you have an organization and you want to make sure that you have a safe way to people to report findings
Hmm.
to you. You can have a vulnerable disclosure program where people can have a way to submit things to you. Usually that's a security at kind of email where somebody
Yeah.
sends in or an abuse or something. But maybe maybe you realize that that email box is getting flooded. You can't deal with all the things that are coming in. So you reach out to some of the organizations that deal with that.
Hmm.
I would say the three biggest ones are HackerOne, BugCrowd, and Integrity.
Yeah.
And you'll get some kind of deal with them where they will take care of your inbox, so to say, and triage the things to verify that the findings are valid or not. And if they are valid, they'll pass it on to your team, and you can solve it, and you'll have some
Hmm.
tracking and stuff. There's different ways to do this. So it's either then you have somebody can just report things to you, or you can have a private program where you will
Hmm.
invite certain researchers to be a part of your organizations, and then you can have a defined set of say scope. Maybe you
Yeah.
want um, mobile.yourapplication.com to be the
Hmm.
one that people are looking at, and if they look at that, they will get paid if they find bugs. You will define like a payment model from low to
Hmm.
critical or to exceptional or whatever, or P1 to P5. And that's the range of what you're willing to pay for
Hmm.
findings, right? And then it's the public one where anyone can just look that you have a public program, you can submit things.
Hmm.
I personally only this is the thing. Bug bounties is my hobby. I've done it full time for fun and
Hmm.
to see if it worked out, but it was very lonely for me, and I
Yeah.
love working with people. I want to be able to, have sick days and do all that
Hmm.
other stuff. That's good for a person like me and my family. But if you're in a situation where you want to poke at stuff,
Hmm.
and I usually want to get paid for my time. That's how it
Yeah.
works. I know it's a hobby. Yeah, you shouldn't really get paid to investing in learning things, but I tend to do.
Hmm.
I love the whole idea of me being able to, let's say, if I have one of my favorite applications, for
Hmm.
instance, or an e-commerce site or something, when I'm buying stuff there anyway, and I have the possibility to, sneak in a little bit of
Hmm.
a secret injection there, and just, or maybe sign up for another user and see if I can access my own payment details. I'm allowed to do that. And if I
Hmm.
find vulnerability, I have the chance to send that in and earn everything from $50 to I think it's like $50,000 now, the
Hmm.
cap levels. And
Yeah.
if you're into crypto, those guys pay mad money.
Yeah.
So, hey,
There's a lot of
blockchain,
stuff to
crypto
protect.
things, Web3, more money.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I think that's a great approach. So it is, for taking it, getting the balance, and also kind of going after the things that you enjoy doing, and making sure that if you're doing day-to-day stuff, is overlapping it with, basically checking to see if you can actually go and look at the source code of the web page and see if you can do SQL injections, or see if you can do IDORs, or cross-site script forgery, stuff like that. So really looking and seeing what possibilities are as you're actually just doing it, day to day, and the sites, and if they have bug bounties, even better. So
Right.
one of the things as well, I would link it. One of the things is I love creativity and content. I love basically all the different setups, and I invest a lot here in my own lab. One of the things I've really enjoyed is your creativity and the setup that you have, and when you're sharing a lot of it. For me, I think that goes into a lot is when you invest in the creativity side of things, because that's what there's many of us are users, and there's others who are creators, and I think what your setup is. Can you tell us a little bit about your setup and kind of how it works, and what's important for you?
We're talking about this.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
okay, cool. So I understand what kind of setup we're talking about. Yeah. This is for me. I wanted to be able to have a space where I had the
Mhm,
possibility to create content or share things that I found interesting,
mhm,
because that's all what it is for me. It's if I find something and I nerd into that, I want to be able to leave some kind of legacy. I'm okay at writing blog posts.
mhm,
I'm semi okay at doing write ups, but I'm really good at communicating and I love talking. I love the sound of my voice. And see how that sounds, right? But the thing is that I need to talk to think. That's kind
mhm.
of how my brain works.
Yep.
I work best when I talk and I communicate. And it's always better if I want to educate you on something, if I'm really invested in the subject and I'm able to explain it to you in a simple way, then I fully understand it.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's just me throwing weird words around and looking cool. So I wanted to find a way to do that, and I wanted
Uh,
to have a space where I could go and just with a flick of a button go from uh, go go from
uh,
nothing to to a fully ready situation where I wanted
mhm.
to just press record and go. That was my
Yep.
main goal. Keep it simple, stupid,
Yep.
one way, easy production. I didn't want to move things around, and I wanted to have a basic setup. So what I have here is I have a basic DSLR camera that's
Mhm,
connected to a lot of fancy stuff and a lot of soundboards and things, so I can route my traffic and I can
mhm.
add on things, and I can add
Yeah, I love
stuff to whatever I
that.
want to do.
The collapse sort of.
Yep, absolutely. And I wanted it to be a way where I seamlessly just can record straight from my
Mhm,
camera, straight into my hard drive, edit it directly, and just push it out if I felt like it. No
mhm.
more taking out the memory card, syncing audio, and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So simplicity was my game. And I was lucky enough to purchase this place, which is in downtown Gothenburg,
Mhm,
where I live, and have that as a studio and have a creative space where I go and I get into that mood and I do stuff. So
mhm.
basically, that's what it is. And Bounty kind of paid for this. So thank you, Bounty. And now I have a creative workspace. So that's what
No,
I
it's
do.
just awesome, because I had the same thing. I used to have an office, and I used to work from home for a long time.
Mm,
And what I needed was a space where it was all ready to go.
yeah.
And what you said is about automation side of things. Absolutely, it's so critical to have something. And for me, if I was to reverse the camera, what I see in front of me is just crazy. We've got several monitors, several workstations, lights, and I just something that kind of really makes it so simple to set up, and so simple. Just kind of it's a plug and play, and you're ready to
Mm.
go. And it's for that makes a big difference. And also investing in the audio quality as well. The one thing I haven't really done here is that, because this is an old Soviet building, is the lighting side. So
Mm.
that's one kind of I've always been looking at, is the lighting. So I was watching your video on the lighting side. I think you were using the Philips Hue bulbs for
Yeah.
the background lights. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and it's really cool, because I think getting that kind of ambience is so important depending on what type of work you're doing. So absolutely.
Easy to, I mean, that is a simple stepstone into getting good
Hmm.
lighting. I mean, of course, you would like to have the aperture extra everything with
Yeah.
all the movie set lights where they don't even react to whatever kind of shutter speed you're using. This is dialed into 25 frames per second, 50
Hmm.
hertz, with a shutter of 1 through 50. because that's my setup. That's what I
Mhm.
like, and then I need to tune the lights to that, so I don't get rolling shutters
Yeah.
or flickering and that or other annoying stuff. It's very easy that happens with extra low budget lights. That's going to happen for you, and if you dim it
Mhm.
down, that's the reason what's going to happen. Well, so I wanted something that would work okay for me, but
Mhm.
would be not super expensive, but most bang for the buck. So Philips Hue lights works okay.
Yeah, no, I think they function wise they do enough for what's needed, and they
Yeah.
create that environment, create that atmosphere in order to do the creativity. And absolutely, when you're talking about speaking and talking, for me, I've got a whiteboard back here, and when I the whiteboard, that's me. You give me a whiteboard marker and a whiteboard, and just
Yep.
let me dump my brain in that thing. That's where I just get creative. It's just nonstop. Yeah, absolutely. It's just
I do
this is
that with
where
my iPad and pen
yeah,
all the time, all the time.
I'm
I
still a
just
bit
draw.
retro old school. So even the whiteboard. But for me,
You carry
it
that with
just
you though?
I don't carry it with me. I usually someone I end up going to pen and paper sometimes. Even I'm always sitting with a pen and writing my thoughts down. And that's the
Lovely.
way to stay creative and just keep your memory going. Because at my age, my memory is starting to fail a bit. So just putting things down allows me to keep kind of going back to the things that I need to go back to and be creative and take notes. So absolutely. But yeah, for me, it's talking and it's sharing and getting that feedback from others. Surrounding
Mm,
yourself, because I'm a very social person also, and surrounding myself. I always try to surround myself with very smart people who make sure that they challenge me into my thought process.
mm,
So it is so. One thing I was just interested about some of the platforms. I've seen the likes of IPSEC and Naham going off and starting to do things like Twitch. What
mm.
platforms are you starting to use for your? Because I think you're still primarily doing YouTube.
I'm
Um,
primarily and only
yeah,
doing YouTube.
only doing
That's
YouTube. So
got mad respect for everyone that
mhm,
likes to diversify and do things over at Twitch. I
mhm,
don't have an audience on Twitch, so
yeah,
I rather, if I want to do something live, I have a live show on
mhm,
Thursdays, not
yeah,
every Thursday,
Bounty
every
Bounty
other
Thursdays.
Thursday.
Yeah,
Bounty Thursdays, and I
yeah,
do that live now. I used to do it like 5 to 10 minute shows every week,
mhm,
and just getting the nuggets out. Now we do it in another format where we have more like the classic radio calling show where people
yeah,
can call in on Twitter Spaces and we'll broadcast live at the same time over at YouTube.
mhm,
So I use Twitter heavily and I use YouTube.
yeah,
Those are the two platforms that I use. Uh, some I did dabble with some Twitch in
mhm,
the beginning, but I'm not in the mood to be sitting in front of 4 to 5 people talking about whatever
yeah,
my kind of day is. I rather just go on YouTube and do something more. The big difference is also that on YouTube, um, you need to provide more of a production value.
yeah,
That's kind of how it works. On Twitch, you can just do whatever and you sit there and you
mhm,
communicate with your chat and have that community. I have mad respect for that. But I want to be a way that I can create content that's long term and that people can go back to and find
yeah.
over time.
That's
I
easy
mean,
accessible as well because Twitch provides it's a bit more challenging. Going through all the hoops and the subscriptions and the kind of it's a little bit harder to kind of get more people because you kind of have to lure them in. But
yeah,
YouTube is a little bit more easier to find content and
for
searchable,
sure.
and so absolutely. So, question also kind of one of the things I enjoy is that sometimes on Twitter you share a lot of your kind of personal downtime side of things, and
Mm.
this is always I think in our industry there's a lot of challenges in things like burnout, stress. People really kind of, sometimes you can get stuck in things for hours and days at a time. What's the
Mm.
what way do you find balance between that? How do you make sure that you get enough, of life and living life versus getting stuck in technology?
I never stop learning, and
Mhm,
my brain usually never rests. Those are two things that I have to accept and deal with. I got
mm.
ADHD, so my brain is just wired that way. That's how it
Mhm,
is. It's always curious. I need
yeah,
to learn new things, and I like to learn into about 60%, and then I get bored of them and move on to the next one. That's how my life works. I accept that. So what I need to do is that I need to find things that keep me interested.
mhm,
And that can't just be one thing. If I end up in a mundane situation doing the same thing over and over again, I'll get bored. And I
yeah,
need to diversify my mental streams.
mhm,
So I do. That's why I'm working at this great consultancy company. I do
Mhm.
YouTube videos. I have a fashion company. I have
So
a
your
sustainable fashion
sunglasses, the
store.
glasses you're wearing are part of the fashion, isn't it? So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I design stuff. I do a lot of things because that's where I
Mhm.
soothe in myself. I need to go from one thing to another. Otherwise, I'll get bored and burn out. And when I'm saying burnout, it's
Yeah.
in the sense of me getting bored to the
Mhm.
extent where I can't do it anymore. I'm like, I just can't do this. And the and I see when that happens and I start to get
Mhm.
into that state, because it's way different than one that you're when you are depressed and you can't
Yeah.
get up in the morning and you're sick and you because that's another thing. What I'm talking about is this boredom kind of burnout where
Mhm.
you don't feel like doing it anymore. It can be that you work too many hours. It can be that you invested too much time in a project. It can be something else. So what I do is that I try to do things in sets, or
Mhm.
I need. It started back in the days in somewhere around 2012, I think, where I decided that I wanted to work full time for an employer for 3 days a week because I
Mhm.
didn't like the balance of me working 5 days, getting two. I thought that
Yeah.
was an unfair.
It is
Uh,
unfair.
it's like, okay, so you're gonna have 65 years of my life. You're gonna
Yeah.
take four. I'm gonna get two. That's a bad equation. I want to do it differently. I'm gonna give
Mhm.
you and society and whatever 3 days. 4 days are mine. And so I adapted my
Mhm.
life according to that principle. And of course, it turned into I work 7 days a week because I do a lot of different projects and I do a lot of
Mhm.
different things. But having that mindset of just scheduling downtime, I have time scheduled that
Yeah.
I don't work. I go outside, I do things, I challenge
In
my
Sweden,
brain.
the typical countryside, it's the summer days and getting out in the fresh air and getting out into nature. Because here in Estonia, it's very similar. It's
Mhm.
I think culture wise in Sweden, Finland, Estonia
I
have
mean, I
very
can almost
similar.
throw a stone at you
Yeah,
over the ocean.
exactly.
We're on the same.
So, and it's very, I mean, it's the same as you need to have that downtime. And even, I sometimes hear I complain in the summertime when I go into the forest to chop wood and I
Mm,
complain about it. But at the same time, after I finished, I've enjoyed it because it
mm,
allows you to switch your mind off from the things that, you know, in our work in this industry, you can be so in kind of your mind goes so focused that it's
mm,
hard to shut off. It's hard to switch off from thinking about, the SQL injections, thinking about vulnerabilities, thinking about the latest, log4j or spring4j, whatever it is.
mhm.
Your mind can get stuck and nonstop thinking about it, and you need ways to switch it off. And
Yeah.
for me, going into nature, getting an axe and chopping some wood and stacking it
Mm.
allows you to do that. So and
And
it's
it
it's a
gives you
great way.
physical satisfaction as well. I mean, I'm a
Absolutely.
nerd. I got T-Rex arms. Those are
Yeah.
tiny, but I chop a lot of wood. And and it
Yeah.
helps me to exercise my body, and it's like you said, it
Mm.
cleanses the mind. And
Yeah.
when you do that, I have this there's this thing called shower moments. Let's say
Mhm.
that you've been hacking or something, or you've been pondering a project for a while, and then you just let it go, you do something else, and you're standing in the shower, and then the ha moment comes when you're like, damn, yes, and you go to the computer and you're
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
no, and there it is, and
So
you solve it.
yeah. So do you mean one of the things that since we're both creators all the time and we're always thinking about kind of projects and
Mhm.
activities and so forth, do you get in the situation when you get some writer's block type of thing when you get into content you're like, oh, I don't know how to progress it. What do you deal how do you deal with that scenario?
I do the work.
You do the work.
That's how it works. Because there's
Okay.
if you listen to people like
Yeah.
Seth Godin and really
Yeah.
smart marketing people, he wrote I don't know how many blog posts every day he did that. Or you can look at creators
Mhm.
like Ipsec that smashes out a huge amount of epic videos, right? And he do that over
It's
and over again.
unbelievable how much he
When
does. So,
Yeah, when I enter that state, both those guys have something called a routine.
mhm.
They just sit down and do the work. And when I'm starting to enter that state when I feel like, nah, I don't feel like doing it.
Mhm.
If you skip it once, it's like if you go into, I don't know, if you start, let's say you start running in the mornings, right? You get up in the morning, you put the first thing you do when you wake up is that you
Mhm.
put on a kettle with your morning coffee, you're prepping that, maybe you do a bit of French press, you're prepping
Mhm.
that shit, and say, okay, when I get home, I'm gonna have that. Put on your running shoes and you run for 20 minutes. You do
Mhm.
that every day for, I don't know, 21 days, because it usually takes 21 days to create a new habit.
Hmm.
The 22nd, 23rd days, it's like natural. It's part of your routine. Like you wake up, you brush your teeth, you eat food, you do that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But when you get sick and you're not doing it for a while, then you're not doing it, and then you wake up in the morning and you're feeling good. You're not sick
Mm.
anymore. Like maybe I should go running. You're like, nah, not today. And then, not tomorrow either. And then that hill of you being able to do it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you just decide that, screw you, brain. I'm going to do my things for me, which means I'm going to
Yep.
do the work. I'm going to run, and I'm going to do it now. And you do it,
Yeah.
and then you back into it again.
Yeah.
It's all about committing.
Yeah, and
That's
getting
how it
into
is.
the habits. I mean, ultimately, one of the books I loved is Atomic Habits. Was a great book into really,
Sure.
how to do it on small scale and really
Uh-huh.
phase it. I mean, for even myself, I'm recently recovering from COVID, and I do a lot of sports. I mean, I'm always basically playing football
Yeah.
multiple times a week.
Mhm.
And the first time getting back, my body was just telling me, enough. You need to slow
Exactly.
down. But kind of, it's important to kind of progress it. Giving enough time and getting back into it. So absolutely right.
Slowly
Is
easing
getting
into
into
it.
that habit and routine. And it's the same way. I mean, I'm always laughing because even when I'm going through and doing some of the capture the flag side of things, I have, when I'm doing capture the flag or I'm doing some type of pen testing, I have the same habit that I have with playing chess. I'm such an aggressive, noisy. I start flying things all at the same time. So I'm just like, running like multiple scripts. So, and I'm a very noisy pen tester. When I'm doing it in engagements, sometimes I kind of step back a bit and do things more manually.
Mm.
But you're absolutely right. You get into those routines, and just like when you're getting a bug bounty, you're going to go through. If you're doing web application testing, you're going to kind of go through, and you're going to go through your routine habits that you're kind of used to, and that are
Yeah.
mostly for you. You'll get results out of it taking those steps.
Mhm.
So I guess kind of getting your life in balance. Just like you have the steps and processes, and make sure that as you sometimes you keep failing in something, you might tweak it a little bit until you get a better result.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the whole thing. Life is about
Mm.
failing. If you haven't realized yet, then it's time to start realizing that right now. Because if we always try to succeed
Mhm.
continuously, we're going to set ourselves down for failure.
Yep.
But we have accept the concept about, okay, I'm just going to experiment with this, see where this goes. And then if you succeed with it, it's cool. And if you didn't,
Yep.
you learned something, and you can try it the other way around. And I went through my whole life just being too hard on myself,
Mhm.
in a way where I wanted to be the best at the things that I did. I want to learn the fastest. I want to do whatever. And I realized that that's not really what life is about. For me,
Yep.
life is about learning new things and having fun. And then
Yep.
if I'm good at it, I want to share that experience with others. That's
So,
my life.
so that mean that you so reminds me one of the things that a crossing point in my career was, and this goes back years. This goes back to like 2002. I was working for, and I was a perfectionist. I will always look for perfection. And I was working on a project, and it always reminds me, it was the grc.com DDoS attack. You ever look at Steve Gibson's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
DDoS kind of paper? So
Hmm.
the company I was working for was a second victim. I was working on the project as well into kind of how to defend against DDoS attacks.
Yeah.
And as I was going through that project, I wasn't sharing with anyone. I was keeping it a secret. I was keeping it hidden, and I wanted it, when I released it and made it available, it had to be perfect. There had to be
Yeah.
no errors. It had to
And it
be
was yours.
100% amazing. It was like, waiting for the Mona Lisa type of, art, that we produced. And my boss at the time said, "Hey, Joe, that's not how you're going to be successful." And my boss at the time was Brian Honan, who's kind of well known, in the security industry now, and he's amazing. He's always been my mentor since. And he said to me, you know, in order to make it perfect, you have to share it. You have to
Mhm.
get other people's feedback. And that changed. That was a moment in my career that changed me, where I actually realized that in order for it to get perfect, I had to involve other people. I have to
Yeah.
involve the people around me, the social sphere, who can provide, because I might, as your point, I might not be the expert in that specific area, but I can
Mhm.
get somebody who knows much more about it than me in order to provide that input. And it really made me realize that the most important thing is when you're doing that is to surround yourself with people. You know, I'm not an expert in everything. There's certain things I'm good at, but I'm not an expert in everything. But knowing who that person to go to is
Mm.
so critical to get their input. And I think that's such critical in order to make sure that we are able to, get validation, to improve, to learn, and also, this industry is very much a community industry. It's not,
Yes.
to your point, you can't do things solo. I mean, I've struggled, I don't know about yourself, being based in Gothenburg, is that when you're away from the heart of the hacking community, you're so far away, and there's so few of you around in that area that going to events and staying social online and in activities, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the podcast because it allows part of that social interaction as well.
Mm.
How do you stay socially, being based in Gothenburg? Is there a big hacking community there? I know in Sweden there is quite a few well known in the industry there. But how do you stay connected with everyone? How do you keep the learning process?
Uh, let's see here. First off, yeah, it's I don't have any local hacking friends.
Mhm.
It's not that I sit face to face with someone
Yeah.
and hack and do stuff. That doesn't happen. I'm blessed to be working at a company with a lot of smart hackers. So
Mhm.
every other week I meet those people right in Stockholm. But other than that, the easiest way for me communicate with people, and
Mhm.
the thing that I do, most of my friends are hacking friends from around the world that I met
Yeah.
doing bug bounties, right? I was blessed enough to be able to travel. I think it's like 13 live hacking events around the world.
Mhm.
And you travel to these places and you end up with 30 to 40 other people that's been
Yeah.
invited to hack there, and you spend a week together more or less. You start having breakfast with people and you interact
Mhm.
and there's social happenings. I'm a social creature, so I thrive in those situations. So for me, being able to just hang out
Mhm.
with people, everything from just having a nice breakfast to popping a beer or just hacking and comparing stuff and having conversations uh, was something that I loved
Mhm.
doing. So I was really depressed when that scene stopped due to COVID.
Yeah.
But so when COVID happened, and I realized that I needed to find a way to just stay connected with people. I do Zoom calls with people. I text people
Mhm.
on iMessage or WhatsApp, or I do Telegrams or
Yeah.
Signal, whatever whatever platform you're having, and I talk to people. I hang out in Slacks. I
Mhm.
usually don't do Discords because I'm old as fuck, and Discord isn't my thing, and I think it's too noisy. But I love
Mhm.
to just talk to people,
Yeah.
and like this, like
Yeah.
I get on calls with people. It's like, hey,
I
how are you doing? Let's talk
yeah.
for a few minutes, and then just being. I'm pretty active on social media,
Mhm.
and that's where I have a lot of people that I found, and I find interesting projects, and I collaborate with people as a creator.
Mhm.
That's how I
I think it's the
entertain
best
myself.
way, especially when you're in the industry and you're in an area where
Yeah,
there's few other that's in the same industry, so it's always difficult. So, but one of the videos, one of the sessions you did that I always remember was with Tom Num Num.
yeah.
That was a fun one because for me, you know,
That's
just
with
watching,
Tom in a hotel bar
yeah,
in
the
the
hotel
morning.
bar
Yeah,
and watching that session and just even I learned so much. Even just piping to tea
yeah.
was something that I hadn't done before. I was like, oh, that's curious, that's interesting. And even watching him,
Minus A for a pen.
exactly. so, so those little things, can enhance, your learning and knowledge so much. So,
Mm.
but you mentioned you doing a lot of the bug bounties and traveling to events. What's some of your favorite events to go and socialize at? I think I watched recently. You were talking about Nullcon coming back again,
Yeah,
which is really cool.
big fan of Nullcon.
So I've actually never been myself. I've always been to the more traditional big trade shows. But what's some of the niche ones, or some of the ones that you love going to?
Ah, besides Las Vegas, I like
Oh
that.
yeah, at the same. What
Uh,
usually it's the same time as RSA. Usually it's kind of either usually the weekend
No, it's
before.
during yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's yeah, yeah, maybe it's B-side San Francisco then, but B-sides Las
Okay.
Vegas is during DEF CON. It's a part of, Hacker Summer Camp.
Yep.
So, I love that, and, then again, going to DEF CON, of course,
Yep.
I really don't like Vegas. It's hard to say that because I understand the whole idea about it, and it's easy to be,
Mhm.
swooned by the whole
Yeah.
experience of being in this huge town, but it's extremely draining. And if
Yeah.
you're in there 5 days or 7 days hacking with massive jet lag, it
Hmm.
usually, you know, it drains me emotionally, and
Yeah.
and that city is designed to do that. So, and then again, so I would say my favorite things in here in Sweden, absolutely Security Fest here in Gothenburg.
Hmm.
Pretty biased because it's my hometown, right? And then
The
it's
local.
Secti in Stockholm. I love that too. Um, I never been to CCC, but I would love to go. I
Okay.
would love to go to Disobey. I've never been either. Uh,
Disobey, that's in Helsinki.
yeah,
Yeah, it's always kind of, it's usually in January. So maybe sometime when it's, I think it was back in person this year. So hopefully I'll get to go myself as well at some
yeah.
point. So I
Then we
do remember
hopefully meet
when
there.
Jason,
It's on my thing that I need to do.
yeah, I think it
Uh,
was Jason Street was when he was over last. I think he was doing Disobey and he was basically taking pictures of Helsinki. And I think we crossed paths at it, but
pretty
it
sweet.
was that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Hopefully, at some point, I'll get to go. It's just across the water from me. So,
Yeah, and but I would say also like Nullcon, like
mm,
why do I like these conferences? And besides Ahmedabad, like the
mm,
super tiny conference in the northern part of India. I was blessed to be there
mhm,
and just hang out with people, and then you're talking with the ones that are they are deeply into
mhm,
bounties. They are into to hacking, and it's a thriving community where you can see the passion
mhm.
in people's eyes, and you don't really see that at RSA.
Yeah.
And so I love these smaller community ones where the bubble is, where you're pushing arms with somebody else, or
Mhm,
you're breaking bread over your laptop, sharing ideas and just having cool things. Um, the bounty space is a bit different than the CTF
mhm,
space, the research space, because it's of course, there's money involved. So I had this conversation with IPSEC the other day, and,
mhm.
and he thinks the community is toxic, and I have to agree, it is to somewhat, because as soon as you add money
Yeah.
into the pot, there's always going to be this kind of hodl thing. Like, why would I share my secrets? And to be fair,
Mhm.
if you had a money making machine that made you, I don't know, everything from 2 grand to 20
Yeah.
grand every month. Why would you share that with someone else and then risk getting duplicates on that and not get paid any
Yeah.
money? So of course there's this holding back. I understand that, but that's a tiny speck of it all.
Mhm.
The rest of it is, and most people that I know about do this. Not all do it full time, but some people like you and I, we
Yeah.
probably like, okay, so instead of you doing this capture the flagged or doing this hack the box, I have mad respect for you guys that do
Mhm.
that. I don't, because I rather invest time in a bounty program that I know pay well.
Mhm.
And if I want to learn something, I want to learn the developers development cycles. I want to know how they push code. I want to know how
Yeah.
they think. I want to have their newsletter, know about new features. I want to engage with that, because if I'm invested in that, I'm going to be way better at breaking down their stuff
Yeah.
than somebody that just does a flyover
Having
and gets content back.
having that product lifecycle development background and knowledge is so critical
Mm,
to knowing to thinking about how the system's created in the background that you don't see. And I
yeah,
think that's a lot of people spend the time going into doing a lot of the academies, a lot of the kind of trying to break down the front door without
mm,
knowing how things are configured in the background. So one of
yeah,
the things that I said, even in my lab here, I go and I try to set it up myself to understand about how it's working in the background, and understand
yeah,
how the configurations, and then try to understand about how those default configurations might be, because that might be where the mistakes are made if people don't do them
right.
correctly. So going through and understanding about how those defaults are, what the credentials are, how to deploy, and then trying to see what it would be like in the background in that development cycle. And if you get into that knowledge, then it allows you to actually, when you're looking at that front door, it might reveal the secrets that
Mm,
allows you to get in. Rather than, I think most people will try to brute force, and basically use a lot of automation, use a lot of scans without really understanding. And I think that's one of the great things. I think people like IPSEC go through and explain it in its entirety. explain how it's working in the background,
Mhm.
and the multiple paths you could take. I think that's a big difference. So having
Well, it
developers,
can. It's vulnerable boxes.
yep,
We really can't do that. Even if I wanted to do a full walkthrough or live hack a
mhm,
target, I can't. Because what happens if I leak something during that live stream, or if I
yep,
leak something, information there, I would be breaching some kind of agreement.
yeah.
And that's not possible.
Yeah, and that's the thing is a lot of for me, I think I first got in, stuck in a lot of. I was back in 2007, 2008 when I was doing a lot of. It was instant response type of things I was getting involved into when companies became breached, and of course, going through,
Yeah.
or it was to do with zero day vulnerabilities. And you start looking at the patch process. I
Mm,
end up getting a lot of NDA processes, and I
mm,
think that's one of the challenges. And one of my favorite events I like going to is here in Estonia. We have an event which is called a symposium, which is all
okay.
about basically it's all the certs from around the world who come together, and it's basically under Chatham House rules, meaning that you can go in and you can talk about things without it being made publicly available, and that's when you really get to hear the real stories about what happened, how things happened, the successes and the failures. And I think
Mm,
for me, that's something that one is that I think we as an industry lose from that because these strict NDAs prevent us from sharing.
mm,
I know that some of the ones I was under, was 5 and 10 years long, which meant that
yeah.
what was the value of releasing it 10 years later. So
Mm.
I don't know if I mean, what's your experience with things where restrictions and limitations, especially when you find things that are significant and could impact a large amount of people.
Well, as you kind of need to understand that as soon
Mhm,
as you send something into a bounty program, it's under some sort of
mhm.
agreement, and you can't really communicate about it. So there's always if you get paid, they
Yep.
buy your silence in a way. So unless they are very open on disclosing
Mhm.
that, HackerOne per se themselves are defaulted disclosure, which is
Yep.
cool. And I think Shopify does that too. They're
Mhm.
very prone on just disclosing the things because that gives people the possibility to understand how things work and do better.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a good way to do it. Um, but most of if you're entering a competition
Mhm.
or if you're invited to a specific kind of bug bounty program, usually you have to sign some kind of code of conduct or NDA where
Yep.
say that you would not talk about this customer. But it's normal. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what we do all the time. I work in cyber, right? I
Yeah.
do the company and I work, we do amazing incident response.
Mhm.
And we do all these super cool cyber red teams, like 13
Mhm.
based red teams on banks and shit. We can't talk about anything of it because you're on strict NDA.
Strict
And even though
NDAs.
you find
Yeah.
cool stuff you want to talk at a conference, you can't.
Yep. And that's always the challenge. It's always, and I think it's one of the things in our industry that if we were able to even white label a lot of things, without
Yeah.
disclosing about who, where, when, whatever, and I think we were getting the ability to share more. I think we can, other companies can learn how to not become victims.
Mm.
And I think we need to find a way to better, have better intelligence sharing, anonymously, where you can have some type of agreement. So I think because the NDAs I've seen are very kind of, let's say, you can't talk about anything.
No.
But I think there had to be a bit more flexibility because, as I mentioned, that event that I go to, which is talking about the successes and failures, that's where you
Mm.
learn so much from. Even
Yeah.
though you can't
It's a
disclose what
show and tell
happens,
kind of
it's a show and
experience, right?
tell. Yeah, it's you get to hear and see the exact steps, and therefore, while when you leave it, you can actually go and check those and other indicators of compromise. You can go check the different things, but
And your brain just, wow, new patterns.
exactly, it's
Never thought
so.
about that. Interesting. And then you'll start down this trail
Yeah,
of,
maybe we have more events like that that kind of allow those types of things. But I think one of the things is transparency and sharing is so critical in our industry and
yeah,
collaborating. So,
love to see
um,
that more.
yeah, absolutely. What tools do you enjoy using? What's some of your favorite tools that you have? That's kind of your go to tools.
Depends on what we're talking about. When we're
Yeah.
talking about hacking, I would say primarily some kind of browser and a
Hmm.
proxy. In my proxy of choice is Burp, and
Yep.
I use that every day, more or less.
Mhm.
But then I do. when it comes to me running VPSs and such,
Hmm.
I rely heavily on BidMe's or price axiom
Okay.
to spin up virtual instance droplets
Hmm.
in DigitalOcean that I do automation stuff from. I love everything that Project Discovery puts out, more or less. Like
Okay.
if they put something out, it's going to be great. I like HTTPX. I love that
Hmm.
DNSX. I love Amass. I
Hmm.
love. Um, I love nuclei, and I love writing nuclei templates that are custom for me. There's so many ways to create
Hmm.
automation and find stuff through using tools. I love SED and I love grep.
Set and grip.
So I would say
Yeah.
those are my go-to things. And I'm a nano user. Blame it on
No,
me. I
so
mean,
so I'm I'm the same. So what I would typically will go to is usually it's either VS Codium or something like from a programming perspective. And then if
yeah,
that doesn't work, then I work my way back to Nano. And then if Nano doesn't exist, then I go back to Veeam. And my last resort is VI. That's always the
yep.
last one I go to.
That's when
But
I
I'm the
throw out the
same.
computer
Yeah.
out of the window and says that this is not able to exit. I can't shut this off. So I unplug the cables and throw it out. That's usually how
Because
that.
there's so many issues especially when you're through a shell, that if you don't have the right basically scaling columns and rows set, it can
Yeah,
just destroy it.
yeah,
And I always find that Nano you can probably be okay because it will auto kind of scaling, but then when you get
yeah.
into Vim and then VI, you can basically get yourself in a bit of a pickle where you can't get out of it,
Yep,
and none of the keystrokes will work, and you end up having to find out. Well, okay, you end up having to create another shell. So,
yep.
but I'm the same. I'll go backwards until my last resort is then I will go through and try to get a proper shell
Mm.
before I touch BI. Otherwise, I can get stuck in there.
That's
Um,
perfect.
question though, when you're using Burp Suite, what's
Yep.
your kind of? Do you prefer to use the in browser Burp's browser, or do you kind
Yeah.
of go? Okay, I find it much easier rather than having to go and set up Burp proxy and have redirects and configure the ports, because I end up having two browsers running side by side. I'm
Yeah.
using the built-in browser because it automatically proxies back through Burp,
Mhm.
and it also allows me to keep the traffic separate as
Yep.
well. If I'm doing some searching, it's going directly and rather than being funneled through the proxy. So
No, I
I was
knew
just
that.
curious.
I mean,
Yeah.
I have I'm one of those Firefox users.
Mhm.
That's the driver that I like to use.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing hacking, I prefer Chrome DevTools. So
Hmm.
I'm using that for certain things. So for yeah, absolutely. I used the internal Chromium based
Hmm.
in Burp because it's easy to set up, and I use multiple profiles, especially if I do some auth integration or IDOR testing. Then I heavily rely on tools that do that for me. I'm not patient enough to do it manually anymore, so
Hmm.
I'll do authorize or similar like maybe autoresponder or certain
Hmm.
things that I want to change or push in. So I'll do that kind of stuff. Yeah, definitely. And I love the repeater. I love intruder. I'm an intruder kind of guy. Most people aren't. And I love turbo intruder for doing
Hmm.
race conditions and massive lists. No, it's my go-to tool.
Yeah, I think for definitely it's mine too as well. I think for most of us, we kind of prefer it's the proven it works, and there's so much flexibility. Even doing decoding,
Mm,
within Burp Suite is
yeah.
fantastic because you can do that. I know a lot of people kind of go into Chef and do it that way, but when you can do it right in Burp, why copy paste out? It's unless you're going to do multiple encodings and decodings, it gets a bit more complex. So you have things that's in Chef that's not in Burp.
Mm,
But most places I can find, I can get it. Either when I'm doing base64 or whether it be URL encoding, you can do it right within the browser. So
mm.
absolutely. So, question: What for anyone who's listening to the show, what's your recommendations about people if they're going down this path and getting into bug bounties? Maybe they're coming from a support background. Maybe they're just at university and thinking about going down this path. What's some of the best starting places? What do you recommend? Because there's a lot of let's say there's a lot of platforms out there. Where would you recommend people getting started?
I would say the best currently and the free
Mm.
one should be the creator of Burp supports Wiggers Web
Hmm.
Application Academy. It's free and it's very easy to
Yeah.
use, and it will give you a good insight to the OWASP top 10, more or less, with labs that you can go through. Then there's you have Pentester's Lab, you have
Hmm.
Hacked you have Try Hack Me, you got all these have specific labs or
Hmm.
academy parts where you can learn things. But I didn't do any of those, and when I hadn't used Burp at all.
Hmm.
Maybe I dabbled with it with some early um, the predecessor
Hmm.
to Kali, right?
Yeah.
And I dabbled around with it a bit, but it wasn't really my main thing. I didn't know why because I was into wireless hacking and doing other
Hmm.
stuff then. Um, but when I started using Burp, I realized that I just had it to get used to the momentum of seeing handshakes happening between
Hmm.
websites and what they were calling and how things were working. Like, oh shit, you entered this page and 45
Yeah.
different JavaScripts loaded. Why did that happen? I didn't see that. And then you'll see all these response getting back and you're starting to play around with the traffic.
Yeah.
And I would suggest anyone do that. Like, turn off all the active things in Burp and just passively observe
Hmm.
stuff. Maybe even install some plugins that would, like Burp Bounty or something,
Hmm.
that would use these known word lists to find identifications. You can use a plugin called Hunt by
Hmm.
Jason Haddix
Yeah.
and similar people that will look for parameters that would look shady in theory, and then would be a good injection point for you. Say, okay, this is equal potential, or this
Hmm.
is could be an over redirect and such. And then you just walk websites. Like, take the normal
Yeah.
website you use every day, the one that you're buying your food from or whatever, and look at the traffic. And you can see what,
Hmm.
okay, so apparently I have ID 465789.
And
And what
seeing if it's
happens if
some
I,
sequence. Yeah. If I put a
yeah,
7 afterwards.
what happens? And then, oh, why did I get the cart of my
Yeah.
neighbor? Weird. And then, you'll start
Hmm.
with thinking about what's happening because you
Yeah.
need to get into the hacker's mindset. And the hacker's mindset is driven by curiosity. What
Absolutely.
happens if I do this?
Yeah. If I change
Oh,
this one thing, what
yes,
happens if even just I always enjoy looking through the cookies and just seeing exactly what is the
sure.
setting, what value is it putting in there? Is it something that is basically just a raw text, or is it actually some type of encrypting, base64, is it URL encoding, whatever it is, and trying to understand about why did it do that? If I
Mhm.
change it, what happens?
Yep.
And I think even when I was going through Naham's new Udemy course is pretty good as well,
Yeah.
because he actually did a pretty good kind of walkthrough into understanding all of the top, and I think Udemy, some of the courses there are quite reasonably priced for most people when there's discounts
Mm.
on.
Yeah.
But for me, I think it was the OWASP Juice Shop was the one
Yeah.
that I enjoyed doing. And you're absolutely right. You can go to OWASP Top 10, and they'll have the academy there, and they'll walk you through each step. To kind of give people the lessons, and it is very, very educational because it does tell you, here's the misconfiguration, here's what went wrong, and here's how you can fix it as well. So,
Yeah.
absolutely, I think it's great advice.
But then again, seeing is believing. People
Mm.
usually ask, when, okay, so I've been doing all these labs, I've been doing all
Yeah.
that stuff. I mean, if you've gone through all the Portsmouth Academy
Hmm.
labs without hints,
Yeah.
go get some bounties. You're well then
You're gonna
overqualified
find you're
qualified for
definitely
that.
you're gonna be successful if people went through them
Yes,
without actually
do
getting
not
tips.
worry. You got this. Because if you've gone through all that, then you've shown the curiosity and the
Yeah.
willingness to learn. So I would say that's about it. Like, start doing that. But the biggest hurdle is probably for
Mm.
people just to get started. Get
Yeah.
started. And
It's
that's
getting
the
that.
thing.
It's just
Start
getting,
now.
yeah. Just go and start it. Try it and give it a go. So it is absolutely, because
Maybe
I
it's
think
not
people,
for you.
you don't want to go down that path that I said earlier. The perfectionist. You don't want to go down that path. If you
No.
find something that you're good at, and that just kind of go and start in that area. You don't have to be good at everything. Just basically find some things that you're curious about, that you kind of can take the next step and just go and get started. Dive right in, and because if you wait for that perfectionist, it will never happen. Because by the time you get to that point, you've already increased your perfectionist bar, and you're basically
Mhm.
going to keep moving and moving that bar up and up until you never get started. So you're absolutely right. And I think once you kind of, if you're going through that course rigor and you get to a few of them, even just go ahead and get started and test yourself.
Yeah, do one. Have fun.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. A follow-up question on that, though.
Sure.
How do you become a good photographer?
A good photographer. So, okay, me and my wife are always having this debate. So, for me, I think we're two very different types because I love photography. Photography is something I enjoy, getting out to. I invest a lot in cameras. For me, I think there's two different aspects of things. There's those who can get the frame initially. I'm a person, I take pictures and then I do a lot of post editing.
Mhm.
So I say that I'm a good technologist and not a great photographer. Someone who's a great photographer can take a picture that requires the least amount of editing afterwards. I think that's when you start kind of getting somebody who knows the frame to take
Mhm.
and requires little editing afterwards. I think that's when you get to good photographer. So me and my wife. So for me, I'm great at technology. I'm great at post editing. I know how to handle a camera. I can, my frames are not the greatest, but my wife absolutely. She gets the frame spot on, and we'll have to do minimal edits to that picture afterwards, if even. So I think that's where photographer, where you start knowing the difference between somebody who's great with technology and somebody who's great at photography.
I agree. But the first step to becoming a
Yeah,
good photographer is to pick up a camera.
yeah. It's actually you use it.
Because that's the thing. You need to
You're
go out
absolutely
and
right.
take pictures. You need to try to do it at dusk, in dawn,
Yeah,
in daytime, in shadow, in
with
clear
different
light.
light.
You
Yeah,
need to understand because that's going to be an extension of your
yeah,
eye, of your creativity. So the first step to be good
yeah,
at something is start doing it
yeah,
without any expectations, but for the fun of it. Then eventually you'll add more stuff as you go because you can spend hours and hours and
yeah,
hours looking at photography tutorials on YouTube and never pick up a camera. And you can know everything
yeah,
about shutter speeds in your head in the theory, but you're shitty at taking pictures.
yeah.
So it's
Yep,
easy to get
you're
stuck in
absolutely right.
theory.
Is
It's
you
easy.
can't be a good photographer without having a camera in your hand
Exactly.
and
That's
actually
how it
using
is.
it.
That's why you need to pick
You're
up the
absolutely
camera
right.
and go out to take some shots.
Yep. And that's that's actually. I mean, when you think about it, you're absolutely spot on. It's like, what's the point in being a good photographer if you don't have a camera in your hand? Is that the best photographer is somebody who's actually out taking pictures, irrespective of the result. So, it's been awesome having you on. I really enjoyed, and hopefully at some point. I mean, we're not too far away, so at some point, I'm pretty sure we'll cross paths. If not, I'll see you probably at DEF CON if everything goes to plan.
Mhm.
You've been awesome. And I think for the audience, they're definitely going to learn a lot from this episode today. At some point, it'd be great to have you back on. And again, my thanks. Any last words for the audience? Anything you would like to leave them with?
I would love to leave them with the concept of staying curious. Be
Yeah,
curious about life, be curious about everything that you encounter, and realize that every person that you end up having a conversation to, if you listen to what they're saying, there's a big thanks you have, a big thing you have something to learn.
that's very wise words. So, Stoke, you've been awesome. Many thanks for being on the show. For the audience, this is another episode of 401 Access Denied. We've had an awesome episode, very educational, a lot of great content. Again, subscribe every 2 weeks and definitely check out. I'll make sure that all of the kind of ways to get in contact with Stoke will be in the show notes. So awesome, and thank you. Stay safe.